Our next tribute comes to us from Antigua. Joanne Hillhouse has authored several books of fiction and has been published in international anthologies like New Daughters of Africa. She is a writer, editor, facilitator, and founder-coordinator of the arts development project, the Wadadli Youth Pin Prize, which fosters young literary talent in Antigua. And now a tribute from Joanne Hillhouse.
Good evening. I first want to say thank you, Justin, for the invitation to be here this evening. I am having a really surreal experience seeing myself in the window next to Miss Kincaid, because I would not be a writer today if it was not for Miss Kincaid. And I don't mean that in a general sense. I mean that in a very specific sense of being a writer, a young girl who loved to read and who had no resources and no idea of what the models could be, how I could achieve writing, how this reading that I loved to do and this imagination that I had and these ideas that I had could find their way out in the world. And walking to school every day from Otters through Ovals, the Holy Family School, not realizing that I was walking past with this young girl who in 1973 changed her name to Jamaica Kincaid, 1973, the year I was born. So for me, a certain connection there as well, that this person has influenced my life in ways that she doesn't even begin to understand. And I'm extremely nervous to be in her company because I would not be the writer that I'm trying to be if she was not the writer that she is. I recently delivered a paper on Jamaica Kincaid at the Antigua conference. And the paper, let me read. When I got the invite to present here on Jamaica Kincaid, I was in the process of fine-tuning my thesis for that presentation. And the paper was entitled About a Girl, a close read of Jamaica Kincaid's Girl, its stylistic devices and aesthetic intersection with literature in the Antiguan oral, specifically Calypso tradition. I think a part of me was trying to reclaim Jamaica's writing as part of the Antiguan literary tradition. Because it was a paper in which I literally lined up Calypso and Kincaid, Jamaica, who have both been so deeply influential in my own becoming as a writer, beside each other to explore the literary overlaps. And so when I got the invitation, right as I was preparing that paper, I took it as a sign that I had to be here to celebrate someone who has not been celebrated nearly enough for all that she has accomplished in this 108, coming from this 108 square mile island. I never said yes to an invitation so fast. I'm not going to redeliver the paper here. Just know that it begins, Jumbi Stories and Nancy Stories, Calypso. These were my introduction to local creative literature. And then there came Jamaica Kincaid. Her coming of age novella, Annie John, at first, which resonated with me in many ways, especially as a gal from Otters, Antigua. A stone's throw from Kincaid's childhood community of Ovals, I was quite literally reading my world. I go on to say that apart from the pure love of the stories she told was the fact that I wanted to be a writer myself, and finally I had evidence that it could be. But I also had evidence that in order to be a writer worthy of putting your work out into the world, that you had to be great. And so I continued to try to work on measuring up even a fraction of that greatness. She was Jamaica, not Antigua. I had someone call me once and ask me, is Jamaica Kincaid from Antigua? This was after she had said some things in the local media and they were trying to figure out who is she. And I very much claimed her, as I do in so many of these conversations, because apart from her being a writer from Antigua, her writing is, it illuminates our reality, the power imbalances in terms of race, class, gender, the us and them of the geopolitics of it all, but she illuminates it by telling these very personal, very specific, very character-driven stories, which is why I found such resonance reading Annie John and Girl. And then of course she does it with such poetry in her language that to this day, I still see debates about whether Girl is fiction or narrative poem, because there's such hypnotic lyricism in her narratives, in Lucy, in See Now Then. I studied Girl in UWI, and it was a masterclass for me in so much about the craft of writing. Its experimental postmodernist style, its achievement of characterization purely through dialogue, all meat, no fact, the natural build of tension without a single explosion, Its artful and efficient call-up of imagery, alliteration, symbolism, contrast, while tackling weighty issues, the mother-daughter dynamic, persistent throughout her work, and one with which I can very much relate, but also race, class, gender, generational shifts, culture, Caribbean culture, and specifically, because the Caribbean is not a monolith, Oval's Antigua culture, through detailing, through specificity. The use of local color in dialogue, in place, in point of view, was one of those overlaps I commented on in my Antigua and Barbuda conference paper, but also the way Calypso not only mirrors society, but questions, challenges, provokes the systems underpinning it. And that is exactly what Jamaica does. And yet, even with the specificity, I argue that there was a universality achieved in the writing of Jamaica Kincaid, a connection deepened by culture, but which at the same time usurps it, in that I've seen so many people out beyond our culture, beyond people who are not Black, people who are not Caribbean, people who are not Antiguan, who relate so much to the themes in her writing, because in the end, it's about power dynamics and it's about people. I'm aware that people disagree with the things that Jamaica has written, especially in notoriously a small place. And perhaps she feels a sense of being persona non grata in Antigua. I wanted to know that this Antiguan loves her very much and loves her writing and continues to be inspired by her. And I look forward to the day when she does get that Nobel Prize that she deserves, so that we can see a billboard with her face and name on it, finally claiming Jamaica Kincaid as one of the greats from Antigua and Barbuda. So the writing is, of course, open to being challenged. I think she's open to that. But what she does is she writes her truth. And in writing her truth, she reminds us that you can't deceive yourself, or you're not betraying anyone, you're not betraying yourself if you tell your story truthfully, or the stories that your characters bring to you and hand to you as a gift truthfully. And you write to lance the boil, to leach out the pain that's within you, and to breathe. Jamaica Kincaid was once quoted as saying that writing saved her life, and I very much feel the same way. I write to breathe, I write to live, I write to exhale, and I aspire to write truth every time, and that is the legacy of Jamaica Kincaid. Thank you, Ms. Kincaid.
And thank you so much, Joanne Hillhouse.